On my birthday, my daughter's gift of whiskey revealed an unexpected twist that changed everything. Tom stood in the small, dimly lit break room at the clinic, the smell of burnt coffee clinging to the air like an unwanted guest. It was a Monday, just a day shy of his 56th birthday, and all he felt was a sinking heaviness in his chest. He watched his colleagues chat endlessly, oblivious to his presence, their laughter ringing like a distant echo in a past he barely belonged to. They underestimated him, an old man behind the lab counter, a medical technician without ambition, but they couldn't see the decades of dedication layered beneath the surface, nor the sacrifices he had made for his family, all while grappling with the weight of a struggling economy. "Hey, Tom." Rob, a younger technician, called out. "Can you double-check this? You always keep it together while the rest of us scramble." There it was. Another backhanded compliment and acknowledgement that only underscored the isolation he felt. As he examined the paperwork, the numbers blurred together, reflecting his frustrations. He fought against the tide of self-doubt that threatened to pull him under. How did he end up here, feeling like a ghost in his own life? He clenched the edges of the table, tendons straining against the urgency coursing through him. He wanted to scream, to tell them that he was more than just the technician they never fully appreciated. The world felt like it was passing him by while he remained anchored in place, the shadow of economic hardship looming ever larger. The night of his birthday, Tom sat quietly in the living room, the television flickering with colors that painted over the darkness of his thoughts. That was when Sarah entered, holding a beautifully wrapped gift, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Happy birthday, Dad!" she exclaimed, as though her joy could fill the fissures in his fractured heart. When he unwrapped the aged whiskey, an icy grip seized his insides. The smooth glass reflected memories that twisted in his mind like a storm. Every drop was a reminder of temptation, a trust he wanted to honor, but horrors from his past clawed at his conscience. His father, a once revered distiller, lost to demons he could only remember in fragmented whispers and resentful recollections. Tom traced the etchings on the bottle Windsor and Sons and felt an intense wave of nostalgia crash over him. Memories of family gatherings filled with hollow laughter flickered behind his eyes. How had resentment transformed into a longing for connection? Could he dig deeper, uncovering hidden truths about this legacy? Would revisiting this part of himself only lead to further disappointment? He wavered between seeking resolution and staying loyal to the boundaries he had crafted to protect himself. But then, he turned and looked at Sarah, the embodiment of purity and kindness, unaware of the endless questions swirling in his mind. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. A deep turmoil churned within him as thoughts of his father wove through his psyche, colliding with his aspirations as a parent. Was it possible to break the cycle and not just succumb to the bitter legacy? He felt each heartbeat in his ears, the oppressing weight suffocating his spirit, the paperwork at work piled higher, like betrayal waiting to devour him. Tom held the whiskey bottle closer, feeling its coldness against his palms, a tangible conflict of vengeance and love brewing within him. The world outside continued to turn, but he stood at the precipice, wavering between unveiling hidden truths and risking everything he cherished. As the candlelight flickered against the glass, illuminating the specter of his past, a question echoed louder than any other: what does it truly mean to reclaim a legacy? Tom's eyes remained fixed on the whiskey bottle, the shadows cast by its amber hue teasing at the possibilities that lay hidden within. The flickering candlelight acted as a beacon, urging him to confront the complexities buried beneath layers of time and fear. He experienced an unsettling mixture of anger and yearning, the desire to distance himself from his father's legacy and the intoxicating pull to understand it. In that solitary moment, Tom felt a seed of determination sprout within him, clashing violently with the fears that had kept him trapped for so long. For too many years, he had rehearsed the role of the dutiful son who carried the baggage of expectations with little inclination to rewrite the script. But with Sarah's birthday gift, an unexpected dialogue with his past had begun. It stirred a part of him long dormant, throttled by the skepticism that had become his constant companion. What if embracing this legacy could mean more than simply facing the specter of his father? What if it meant unleashing a side of himself that had been hiding under layers of resentment? The allure of discovery coaxed him from his cavern of self-doubt, igniting a flicker of hope queasily entwined with trepidation that he stood, legs shaky as he paced the living room, the whiskey still cradled in his grasp. Sarah's laughter, a soothing balm, wrapped around him amidst the turmoil. For her, he needed to grasp this opportunity to forge a future unmarred by his father's failures. Recalling the bewildering beauty of family gatherings, the tales of courage laced with humor lost in so much bitterness, he felt a potent urge to reshape those narratives. Every sip could be a connection, not just a choice. He would not let his father's demons claim his relationship with Sarah. Reflecting on his role at the clinic, Tom contemplated further. A medical technician wasn't merely a placeholder. What if he infused ambition into this stagnant existence? Rather than accepting the complacency of his colleagues, could he push against the boundaries that had confined him? Perhaps it was time for a new direction, one where his competence would be acknowledged not just as a technician, but as a vital force within the healthcare setting, an educator, an innovator, a leader. His heart raced as he envisioned a plan. Returning to school, gaining fresh knowledge, and possibly creating a mentoring program for younger technicians to guide them through the complexities he once stumbled over. The idea resonated in his chest, fiercely igniting feelings of clarity and purpose. But would he have the courage to take the leap? Pacing now, Tom stopped by the window, watching the world outside blurring with the rain. Nature's cleansing was a metaphor for renewal, and just like those droplets pounding against the glass, he felt the weight of stagnation crack under the pressure of this newfound resolve. Shaking hands unwrapped the whiskey from his embrace. It became a symbol not of obligation, but of exploration. Yet in the back of his mind, a nagging whisper of fear clung to him. What if the ghosts of failure surfaced again, threatening to drown him in their chaos? The path ahead was uncharted, and the stakes felt agonizingly high. He knew his journey toward understanding and overcoming his legacy would not be easy. But amid the uncertainty lay a yearning for growth that was far more powerful than his trepidation. Just then, his phone buzzed on the table, a reminder of the work he still needed to address. As he glanced at the texts, the harsh reality of unfiled reports and looming deadlines struck him. Could he really tackle both his inner transformation and professional development? Fueled by determination and fear, he whispered a promise not just to himself, but to Sarah that he would rise from the shadows and illuminate their shared path forward. But before he could dive into that world, Tom's gaze fell back to the whiskey bottle. It had triggered deeper reflections, and he realized he would have to confront his father's legacy head-on, one sip, one revelation, one challenge at a time. Surrounded by memories tethered to both bitterness and love, he took a deep breath. The time had come to face the ghosts and embrace the winds of change, nudging him to question not only what to do with the whiskey but how it would influence the man he wanted to become. As he reached for his phone again, a newfound urgency surged through him. It wasn't just about reclaiming a legacy, but rather about redefining his own narrative as the architect of his future. The uncertainties were thick, but choices had to be made from here on out. Would he embrace this whirlwind of transformation that awaited him? With heart pounding at the endless possibilities, the next step beckoned. The morning light filtered through the window, illuminating Tom's path forward. He stood in the kitchen, a world of possibilities swirling in his mind, fueled by the determination that had crystallized the night before. It was as if a fog was lifting, unveiling the groundwork for change he'd long considered. Each breath brought a reminder of inadequacy, yet it pushed him to confront that very inadequacy and reshape it into something meaningful. Tom grabbed his laptop, the tactile sensation of the keys instilling confidence within him. As he opened it, the realization hit him hard. Those unfiled reports would serve as a foundation for something new. What had once been a weight of procrastination now felt like a launchpad. Instead of fearing the mounting deadlines, he would conquer them, channeling that energy back into the growth he sought. Perhaps if he could face and rectify his errors at work, he could also address his fears concerning his father's legacy. With renewed vigor, he started organizing documents, taking one report at a time. Each click of the mouse drowned out the echoes of doubt that had clung to him for years. But while he was engrossed in the demands of the job, thoughts of Sarah lingered at the corners of his mind. What kind of man did he want to be for her? How could he illustrate not only the importance of facing fears but also the joy embedded in growth? Taking a break, he opened a new document to brainstorm ideas for the mentoring program he'd envisioned. The notion of fostering growth in others sparked something profound within him. He felt he had navigated the pitfalls of his own journey long enough. Perhaps guiding those newer to the field would both honor himself and divert attention away from the overwhelming shadows of his father's past. But what if I mess it up? The question echoed loudly, but Tom pushed past the doubt, channeling it into pragmatic steps. Instead of paralyzing him, fear fueled creativity. He made lists, topics to cover, potential mentoring methods, and goals for himself. Each bullet point became a stepping stone to a future where he was not merely existing behind the tech booth but actively engaging with and inspiring those around him. As sunlight streamed into the room, time slipped away unnoticed. The kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh coffee, yet Tom was too enthralled by his newfound clarity to indulge. It was invigorating. For the first time, he felt like a catalyst instead of a passenger in his own life. By the time midday arrived, Tom's mind swam with plans. He decided on the first meeting for his mentoring program. It would be a small gathering of younger technicians, an informal setting where experiences would be shared, and each would leave with a tangible tool they could implement in their work. Ideas began to flow freely, each one more tangible than the last, his excitement sparking an inner dialogue that pushed boundaries he had never dared to cross. Yet, just as he began to finalize his concepts, a text popped up on his phone, a reminder of an old friend from the clinic. Jason. As children, the two had shared innocent dreams of success in their medical careers. The text felt like an intrusion, a connection to another part of his past he had contemplated severing. Jason was known for sharp insights but also for idle judgments, particularly around ambition. Tom hesitated, the screen's glow illuminating his furrowed brow. He could ignore it, retreat into his bubble of ambition, or he could reach out. Each option bore consequences that cut deeper than surface-level fears. Should he continue breaking free from expectations? Or risk opening old wounds, facing the self-doubt that always seemed to find him? In that moment, the burden of choice pressed heavily upon him, tugging against the autonomy he so desperately craved. The decision loomed large over him like the shadow of his father's legacy, but this time, Tom no longer felt paralyzed by it. Instead, he felt a flicker of light beckoning him to leap into this uncertainty. As his finger hovered over the keyboard, he was acutely aware of the pivotal nature of his decision. He could choose safety or dive deeper into the chaos of potential. Would he take the plunge into this unexpected reconnection with Jason, or was it time to forge ahead, steadfast in his resolute intention to redefine his own narrative? The clock ticked, anticipation crackling in the air. A single breath could change everything. Tom was on the brink of a discovery that could redefine not just his path at the clinic, but his entire sense of self. Tom's finger finally pressed against the keyboard, his heart racing as he typed out a simple message to Jason. Hey, it's been a while. How are things? It felt both liberating and terrifying. Sending that text was a test of his newfound resolve, a tangible step into the unknown, a path leading to a reunion that could either reaffirm his growth or cast him back into the shadows of his past. That he barely had time to let the anxiety settle when Jason's response chimed back, startling him. Good. Just busy with work. We should catch up, meet for a drink. The direct invitation held a subtle weight, yet Tom's thoughts spiraled. It had been years since he saw Jason, and the last thing he wanted was to fall back into a conversation about the burdens of ambitions or familial expectations. But the thought of turning him down now felt like stepping backward. Tom paused. This was more than a meeting, it was a challenge. The idea of facing Jason was both a test of his growth and a potential catalyst for further development. Did he really want to confront his past, or was he ready to show not just Jason but himself that he had moved on? He finally typed back, "How about tomorrow evening?" After hitting send, he felt a mix of dread and excitement wash over him. This was the first time he had reached out in years, shifting the paradigm in his life from being defined by others to advocating for his own narrative. The following day unfolded with relentless anticipation. As Tom prepared for the meeting, he reflected on his personal journey, the mentoring program, and the people he aimed to inspire. The same eyes that once viewed himself through the lens of his father's legacy were now seeing the potential of growth within other technicians. Yet, a gnawing doubt crept in. Would Jason recognize the new Tom? Or would he see the same boy still trapped in his father's shadow? As he arrived at their chosen bar, an air of nostalgia enveloped him. The familiar smells and sounds tugged at memories both good and bad. He spotted Jason at a corner table, his face bearing the marks of time and experience, a stark reminder of their childhood dreams. As the two locked eyes, a smile broke across Jason's face. They embraced, and Tom felt a surge of conflicting emotions. They eased into conversation, sharing polite updates about work and lives. Each question or answer felt like a subtle dance, the tension of what went unsaid ricocheting off the walls. As Jason recounted his successes, Tom listened, invested in the dialogue but wrestling with his internal narrative. He had spent so long avoiding his past, now, it was unfolding before him in vivid shades. Then came the moment that shifted the ground beneath him. As they reminisced, Jason took a sip of his drink and posed a question that caught Tom off guard. So, do you still feel the pressure of following in your dad's footsteps, or have you carved out your own path? The question hung heavily in the air, a clarion call to confront his fears head-on. As Tom contemplated his answer, he realized this moment wasn't about just reconnecting with Jason. It was a chance to define who he truly was outside the echoes of his father's legacy. Each word he spoke now carried the weight of a choice, one that could begin to untangle his narrative from the past that had long held him hostage. Tom took a breath, finding a flicker of courage hidden in those long hours of self-reflection. "I'm finding my own way," he finally replied, the steadying timbre of his voice a testament to his journey. "And I'm ready to embrace what that means." For the first time in years, Tom felt an actual shift within. This was more than a reunion, it was an acknowledgement of his growth, a signpost along the path he was forging. But underneath this newfound confidence was a nagging realization that this conversation was merely the beginning of a much larger reckoning. As they continued discussing the future, Tom's mind buzzed with new ideas for his mentoring program, but beneath that, he sensed that this meeting with Jason had sparked something deeper within him. He needed to challenge the vulnerabilities that lingered, to forge ahead regardless of the fears that might surface. What lay ahead on that journey? And how would confronting the past reshape his understanding of who he was meant to be? The taste of uncertainty hung in the air like the alcohol swirling in their glasses, ripe with promise yet laced with risk. This was far from over. It was just the beginning. The evening lingered in Tom's mind long after their conversation had concluded. As he walked home, the bustle of the city felt different, as if each passing face recognized the strides he had taken. Yet, mingled with the exhilaration was an anxiety that curled tightly in his gut. His words had echoed with a newfound clarity, but the implications weighed heavily on him. Back at his apartment, Tom sank into the worn armchair that had seen better days. He began to reflect deeply. Embracing his own path was simpler in theory than in practice. Could he really separate himself from what he longed to escape? Each achievement in the mentoring program was a step away from his father's legacy, but what if that ladder to independence was unstable? A part of him feared that for every nudge forward, he could just as easily slide back down. With those thoughts swirling, he grabbed his laptop, determined to reinvigorate the mentoring program that had become the centerpiece of his recent growth. The blank screen loomed before him. Ideas flowed harshly, teetering between enthusiasm and self-doubt. He needed structure, a workshop, an outreach initiative, something substantial to inject into the program. The cursor blinked mockingly as he stared at the empty page. Suddenly, an idea struck. It would be fresh, a workshop on tackling pressure from various sources, including familial expectations. He firmly typed, "Breaking Free, the Pressure Paradox." The title washed over him like water. It was both a personal struggle and a universal theme. This could be a pivotal moment, not only for his participants but for himself. He realized he had spent countless hours talking about the burden of pressure without ever addressing how it could be transformed into something constructive. His own experience with Jason had shown him the importance of liberation from past fears. If he could distill that understanding for others, perhaps he would ultimately unshackle himself from the same doubts. Building the workshop outline took hours. He immersed himself in research, gathering tactics, stories, and experiences from others who had successfully navigated the pressures that made them feel trapped. Though each new section he added seemed to reveal another hidden facet of himself, it also unearthed deeper questions. How had he internalized these pressures for so long? And as he prepared to share those narratives with other technicians, how could he assure them that they, too, had the capacity to redefine their journeys? Each answer demanded introspection, a level of authenticity that he was still grappling with. The workshop could serve as a transformative platform not just for others, but for himself, a reckoning with truth. The closer he came to launching it, the clearer the duality of his journey became. On one hand, he was empowering others. On the other, he was still grasping at his own beliefs. As Tom set out to finalize details, the following pieces of content began to fill the framework of his workshop. Not only skills were to be taught, but also real stories of struggle and success. He began crafting a narrative that intertwined vulnerability with strength, using his own experiences and insights as a probing foundation. In that moment of clarity, he found his footing. This was not just about helping others deal with pressure, it was about embracing it as he forged ahead. With a sense of purpose rekindled, he closed his laptop for the night, feeling the weight of determination settle on his shoulders. But as he prepared for bed, a thought cascaded into his mind. Was he truly ready for the vulnerabilities that would surface during his own storytelling? The risks he was willing to take became a looming presence. The chance to inspire others also posed the risk of revealing parts of himself he hadn't fully faced. As he turned off the light, he understood one thing profoundly: the moment of truth was approaching, and he could no longer hide behind his father's patchwork legacy. When the time came to lead that workshop, he would confront something deeper than expectations. It would become a stage for life's reckoning, not just about his story but about the collective power of transformation, urging others to step into the light, and ultimately inviting them to embrace their own journeys. What revelations awaited him in that room filled with eager learners? Would he face the shadows of his past, or would he emerge as the guiding light he longed to be? Tom awoke the next morning, the sun cutting through the pale curtains, awakening a sense of urgency within him. He had lingered on the precipice of vulnerability the night before, and now it was time to plunge into the unknown. The workshop was only days away, and yet he could feel the familiar grip of dread choke his determination. In the bright morning light, he paced his small apartment, caffeinated thoughts blending with his rising anxiety. Each footfall echoed the same questions. What was he truly trying to achieve? Was he merely trying to prop himself against expectations, or was this a genuine exploration of truth? He grabbed the notebook he had been using to outline the workshop. Scribbled notes filled the pages, and fragments of stories he hoped to share lined the margins. With each glance, doubt crept in. What if his tales fell flat? What if his revelations failed to resonate? Moments of reflection flickered within him, tormenting but revealing. Could he risk sharing his heart when he wasn't even sure how to mend it himself? His morning ritual shifted. He found himself in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as his mind reeled. Chopping vegetables was ironically calming; each slice provided clarity he lacked elsewhere in his thoughts. As the rhythm settled into his routine, he considered a crucial question: who was he really when stripped of the legacy paved by his father? The father-son expectations shaped their relationship like clay, and as Tom mused over them, clarity emerged. He realized his journey wasn't solely about dismantling a familial legacy, it was about acknowledging it. His father's influence had crafted his resilience, albeit through pressure. Confronting his father's legacy meant peeling back layers to find his true self. After breakfast, Tom jotted down a new exercise for the workshop. Participants would not only share their pressures but also define their sources of inspiration. If he wanted to lead them in truthful exploration, he first had to model that bravery himself. He wrote with determination. What mattered was authenticity, the raw acceptance of feelings associated with weighty expectations. As he composed his thoughts, he recognized that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than a setback. The workshop would offer not a facade of triumph, but an honest journey filled with missteps and realizations. Later that day, Tom connected with fellow mentors for feedback, seeking insights that would inform his approach to facilitation. With each discussion, he cultivated confidence. Their encouragement sparked a flicker of hope. They shared their stories of struggle and enlightenment, each revelation further reinforcing the merit of authenticity. He began to shape the workshop structure not just for information, but for an emotional landscape where participants could walk together, recognizing shared weight and shared release. Days passed rapidly as the workshop's launch drew near. As he stared at the clock, a small pang of fear spiked. Could he adhere to his newfound commitment to vulnerability? Was he truly ready for that kind of exposure? The evening of the workshop arrived, and he stood outside the meeting room, heart throbbing in tandem with the pulse of the city outside. He could hear muffled chatter inside, voices of his participants mixed with the echoes of personal stories, anticipation mixing with anxiety. It was time for confrontation, not just with them but with himself. Taking a deep breath, he felt a spark. Perhaps amidst the chaos of expectations lay clarity. The moment he had prepared for was here, but it also held a question he couldn't ignore. Would he step onto that stage as Tom, the mentor, or remain cloaked in his father's shadow? With that thought swirling in his mind, he pushed open the door, stepping into the awaiting response of vulnerability. The first words had the power to transform the tide that would follow. What truths would surface once he began to speak? Would he embrace the light or retreat into the familiar darkness? The atmosphere was thick with expectation as Tom stepped into the brightly lit room, his senses heightened. The hum of voices fell into a hush, and all eyes turned toward him. He felt like a lighthouse drawing in weary ships, yet the lighthouse was uncertain, flickering and barely able to stand against the tide. The moment felt monumental, swelling with the potential for either connection or disconnection. "Hello, everyone," he began, his voice cracking slightly. The air tasted of anticipation, charged and electric. People nodded, urging him forward, but with the weight of his father's legacy still coiling tightly around him, he hesitated. What would they perceive? Would they expect the polished mentor, or the flawed man standing before them? He inhaled deeply and conjured the image of his father, not the intimidating figure whom he had once strived to escape, but a more complex blend of aspiration and fear. He had to anchor himself, to break this visible chain that tethered him to expectations. Today, we're going to explore the pressures that shape us, but let us also dig into what inspires us. The nods now transformed into palpable interest. He could see hunger in their eyes, a thirst for truth. It fueled him to push through the discomfort. With every word, he stripped away layers of bravado that had become second nature. "I've dealt with my own pressures, deeply rooted in family legacy, and it took years for me to acknowledge them." To his surprise, vulnerability sparked a reciprocal fire in the room. One participant, a woman in her 30s with hollow eyes, stood. "I've pushed myself too hard to be the perfect daughter," she shared, her voice trembling. "But I often find myself feeling lost." Gradually, more voices joined. Stories spilled forth like a torrent, each echoing some aspect of his own journey. And as they shared, something magical began to happen. Tom felt the weight of expectations shift outside of him. It was liberating to acknowledge the shared struggle and connect through these profound moments of honesty. He guided the participants in an exercise he had initially doubted. They described their pressures and the inspirations that shaped them, revealing the tangled roots connecting their lives. The tapestry of experiences and emotions painted within the room transformed the narrative. It wasn't just his workshop anymore, it was theirs. It was messy, chaotic, and bursting with authenticity, but with every revelation came a nagging undercurrent of fear within him. What if amidst this breakthrough, he revealed too much? Moments of self-doubt still lingered, ghost-like, whispering fears of exposure and shame. Would they judge him? Would they see only the son rather than the man striving to redefine his own narrative? Suddenly, as he prepared to share a personal story that encapsulated his emotional growth, he noticed a shadowy figure at the back, the unmistakable silhouette of a man who looked remarkably like his father. It sent a jolt of anxiety down his spine, washing over him like cold water. Was it a phantom of his imagination, a manifestation of his fears, or had the man truly come? Tom's heart raced as he abandoned his notes. The air felt charged, but it was now layered with uncharted confrontation. He couldn't ignore it. "Sometimes, confronting your past," he began, voice steadying as he found strength in his newfound community, "means facing its very embodiment." And with that, the entire room held its breath, collective anticipation electrifying the air. Would he confront those fears head-on? Would he wrestle the shadows that lingered, or retreat once more to the familiar? As he paused, eyes scanning the faces before him, he realized one undeniable truth. This interaction wasn't just about them learning from him, it was about him learning from them. What insights would he excavate from this moment, and what would that shadowy figure reveal about his future? The decisive moment loomed, both daunting and exhilarating, leading Tom further down a path he never anticipated. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a question lingered. Was he prepared for the confrontation that was about to unravel, and what truths would come coursing out as they faced the unknown together? The weight of silence hung in the air, a tangible force as Tom's gaze shifted back to the shadowy figure at the back of the room. The man hadn't moved, but his presence loomed, tethered to Tom's fears and unexamined conflicts. He felt a swell of resentment alongside curiosity. Why had his father chosen today, of all days, to haunt him? Facing our past can often be the hardest journey we undertake, he said, the words rushing forth. There was something intensely personal in declaring this truth to the gathering. A voice inside urged him to reclaim this narrative, to wrest control from the shadow, stealing himself. Tom addressed the figure again. I won't let fear dictate my choices anymore. But the statement resonated less with conviction and more like a plea. He wasn't just speaking to the room, he was speaking to himself. The struggle wasn't solely about his father but about charts yet untraveled in his own life. If he remained shackled to memories, he would never fully emerge as the person he aspired to be. Today is about liberation, he continued, rallying his spirits. And liberation requires us to voice our truths unflinchingly. The faces surrounding him now reflected a mixture of intrigue and concern, many still tethered to their own ghosts, grappling with the ideas he was cultivating. Any self-doubt was no longer a personal barrier but rather a shared human condition. The room buzzed, sparks of revelation flickered in the air. One woman chimed in, what if the very thing we dread is also the key to our freedom? She looked with fervent hope, as though yearning for a closure she could reach out and touch. The group began to nod, a beautiful acknowledgement of the complexity they all faced. Tom felt it, a collective weight lifting, folding in on itself, nourishing individual truths ready to be summoned. He encouraged them to articulate their struggles into words, capturing the essence of their histories like chaotic art. He shared his own stories of conflict, of regret, moments embedded with the melancholy of living in someone else's shadow. The cries of his past morphed into whispers of healing as he invited others to share theirs. The shadow in the back stirred. Tom divided his focus, turning his attention to that specter, now almost tangible, a reflection of everything he had run from. Confronting it head-on sharpened his sense of purpose that he stepped forward, directing his words as if reaching for the man's fading silhouette. You may always be part of my journey, but you will no longer dictate my path. I wield the narrative now. Each syllable he spoke was drenched in emotional upheaval, yet laced with burgeoning strength. The room, breathing with him, mirrored his confrontation. The clash had transformed from a solitary struggle into an experiment in shared vulnerability. As stories poured out and threads intertwined, Tom discovered that he was not just liberating himself from the shadows of his past, he was revealing the intricate connections that bind personal stories to a universal human experience. Empowered by their collective energy, Tom felt the shadow dissipate, not entirely gone, but altered. It transformed from a looming specter to a fundamental piece of his landscape, reminding him that facing one's own fears did not erase them, but rather redefine them. The workshop had evolved dramatically, pulsating with the essence of liberation and discovery. Energized, Tom realized this was not just a professional growth session. It was a metamorphosis reaching far beyond his father's traditional expectations, but even in this moment of triumph, a lingering question gripped him. What other aspects of his past awaited his confrontation? What secrets lay beneath the surface of his connection with his father? A father he suddenly understood less about than he thought. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the crucial intersection of freedom and uncertainty. With a composed smile, Tom prepared to steer the workshop toward deeper revelations, embracing the unknown while becoming the architect of his own fate. The air was still. Electric, charged with potential. Was the next confrontation with his father inevitable, or was there another twist awaiting him that would redefine everything yet again? The air thickened as Tom adjusted the microphone, feeling the weight of anticipation from the participants around him. Each gaze bore a silent question, their expectant faces inviting more than just platitudes. The liberating moment lingered, but he understood that true transformation required further exploration. "Let's dive deeper," he encouraged, his voice steadier now. "Fear is a solid block in our paths. But what if it's also a canvas, an opportunity?" He sensed the shift in energy, the group leaning in. Hints of renewed courage flickered to life, an assurance that the stories they shared held more than just pain, their lay lessons, and perhaps, hidden strengths waiting to be unveiled. As he prompted reflections, Tom felt a stirring inside. Could facing his own memories reveal not just vulnerabilities, but also dormant qualities within himself? He thought of how he navigated his career, often overshadowed by external expectations rather than carving his own niche. Suddenly it struck him he had largely let his past define him. "Consider your darkest fears as invitations," he launched into the exercise, driving home the need for confrontation. "What are they hiding, and what can you discover about yourselves through them?" His voice rang with enthusiasm, transcending the workshop's earlier feelings of vulnerability. Application over introspection was becoming the new theme of their gathering. Participants began to respond, not just with words but with emboldened expression. A man in the front spoke of his fear of inadequacy and how he vowed to finally pursue a long-desired career change. A woman detailed her crippling social anxiety and how she wished to step forth and trust herself more. Each narrative intertwined, weaving a tapestry of human experience threaded with resilience. Tom's heartbeat quickened as he saw the shift in them. Energy surged through the room, and an extraordinary solidarity formed. This was not just a confrontation with fears, it was a reclamation of power. In their brave admissions, he identified gaps within himself that still hesitated to leap forward. This realization was more than a reflection, it was a call to action. As he pressed on, Tom's thoughts turned inward. The specter of his father began to shift once more, no longer solely an opponent but a complex part of his own narrative. The realization ignited a sense of urgency within him, the need to understand the man who had shaped so much of his emotional landscape. "Maybe it's time to seek closure in a different way," he murmured, not so much to the group but as a burgeoning thought forming in his mind. The shadows of doubt may not vanish, but they could be shaped into a different entity altogether. With renewed clarity, Tom posed a final question to the workshop: what if we embraced the messiness of our journeys? What if we welcomed the complexity instead of resisting it? A ripple of agreement passed through the room, a frenzy of understanding taking the atmosphere by storm. As Tom observed the participants grappling with their transformational moments, he felt a blend of anticipation and dread coursing through him. His reflections on his father begged for action, a confrontation much deeper than spoken words. This exploration felt inevitable, the time having come. In the distance, the clock ticked ominously once more, nudging him closer to revelations he was only beginning to grasp. Beneath the surface of liberation lay an intricate web of regrets and potential. He could feel it. What secrets might his father be hiding, and how did they align with his own? With a determined nod, Tom quietly resolved to confront the impending discussions. But could he untangle the threads of his identity without losing himself in the process? The workshop had stirred more than he anticipated, an unraveling, an awakening, but there was still so much more to realize. As the session ended, a question gnawed at him. Would reaching out to his father illuminate the truth, or would it only resurrect deeper wounds? The winding path ahead beckoned, unread and unpredictable. Tom awoke the next morning with an invigorating blend of clarity and anticipation coursing through his veins. The workshop had been a transformative experience, its echoes lingered in his mind, catalyzing a realization he was no longer defined merely by his father's legacy. The narrative had shifted, and for the first time, it belonged to him. His reflection in the bathroom mirror was strikingly different from what he remembered. There was a solid confidence in his gaze, a recognition of the competence he had spent years building through dedication and skill. This was not just Tom, the technician, this was Tom, the mentor, a man ready to embrace change both in himself and in those who crossed his path. The decision to confront his father loomed large over him, but with it came a newfound resolve. The thoughts of their strained relationship no longer filled him with trepidation, but rather with courage. He was prepared to explore the complexities of a father-son dynamic that had dictated so much of his life. With every heart-pounding moment, he felt them both drawing closer to reconciliation, one that honored where they had been and redirected them toward where they could go. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "Can we chat tonight? I have something I want to share." A smile tugged at Tom's lips. No matter the weight of his burdens, Sarah's unwavering light remained a beacon. He knew this moment of connection would further solidify his path. For her, he would confront every shadow that lingered, starting with his father. As evening approached, he settled into his chair, an untouched notebook resting on the table. Memories of having to carry his father's shadow ebbed in and out, shaping his narrative as he awaited Sarah's arrival. This wasn't just a personal meeting, it was the beginning of a journey towards transparency, healing, and empowerment, the legacy he wished to fulfill. When Sarah entered with an enthusiastic smile, he felt a surge of pride for the young woman she had become. They exchanged pleasantries, and as she settled beside him, he sensed her bubbling excitement. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about connection and how important it is to share our stories," she began. "I want to understand more about you and Granddad. I know you've had a complicated relationship, but I think it's important." The walls inside Tom's mind slowly began to dissolve. He nodded, inviting her to continue. "I want us to explore this legacy together," she said earnestly. "I believe the stories we uncover can be powerful, especially for us." The sincerity behind her words struck him profoundly. Her gentle inquiry illuminated the room, guiding him to the realization that confronting his father's legacy wasn't just an individual endeavor, it was a family journey. Together, they could create a narrative steeped in truth rather than fear. "I've realized that our futures are shaped not just by what we've inherited but also by how we choose to move forward," Tom replied, his words steady and purposeful. "I think it's time I reached out to your grandfather. There are things that need to be said, and I want you to be part of that." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding and support. It was a defining moment, a mutual acceptance of rewriting the familial narrative. They started brainstorming ways to approach those conversations, tackling fears that had once gripped Tom's heart. The thought of liberation surged within him as if unveiling this path could breathe new life into the bonds between generations. Reflecting on this shared decision fueled Tom's determination. He would not only confront his father but also establish a new relationship rooted in honesty rather than bitterness. In doing so, he would reclaim his own identity while paving the way for Sarah's future. The complexity of their history suddenly felt like an opportunity for connection. The next day, Tom retrieved his phone and slowly typed a message to his father. Each letter held a weight, a significance marked by years of unspoken tension. "Dad, can we meet to talk? I believe it's time for us to discuss our past and how it shapes our futures." The sense of impending liberation washed over him. He was taking the first step toward breaking free, not just for himself but for Sarah and the generations that would follow. As the hours passed, the message remained a mixture of anticipation and dread, but he felt oddly empowered. He would not let fear dictate his actions any longer. Later that evening, a reply finally pinged on his phone. "I'd like that. When?" The agreement was quick but significant, and Tom replied with their scheduled time. As the days stretched ahead, he focused on preparing for the meeting, reflecting on the conversation he wished to have. The idea of facing his father, exploring the layers of their past, and sharing how those experiences shaped him into the man he was becoming felt monumental. The day arrived, and both anxiety and excitement coursed through him as he approached the cafe they had chosen. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air, yet it felt like a new beginning rather than a haunted space. Tom settled at a table, his heartbeat steady as he awaited his father's arrival. When his father entered, a familiar tension bubbled underneath the surface, yet there was a different energy this time. Tom felt as though he were standing at the edge of a precipice about to leap into transformative waters. "Tom," his father greeted, the acknowledgement tinged with uncertainty. It was a greeting that encapsulated years of absence, both physical and emotional. "Dad," he replied evenly, "thank you for coming." Seated across from him, Tom felt the urgency of the conversation. "I've spent so long grappling with our past, and I believe it's time we discuss it openly, free from judgments and shadows." There was an immediate shift in the atmosphere, a potential for vulnerability both challenging and liberating. As they exchanged unguarded reflections, stories began to unfold, narratives of struggles, fears, and regrets, all echoing the resonance of Tom's own experiences. The dialogue transformed from discomfort to a collective sense of history, as they began to break down the barriers that had long kept them apart. Questions emerged that stripped away defenses. Answers painted the portrait of two men reclaiming their stories. The patterns of the past, each haunting and raw, slowly began to reshape themselves into threads of connection. As the conversation continued, Tom felt a powerful sense of release, a momentous achievement born from the willingness to confront fears. By the end, tears glimmered in the corners of their eyes, yet there was a profound understanding between them. They had laid bare their experiences and vulnerabilities, forging a bond that transcended the legacies that once shackled them. It was a journey toward mutual acknowledgement and acceptance. As Tom stepped from the cafe, a wave of relief washed over him. He had conquered not just a conversation, but a lifelong struggle against his father's shadows. In doing so, he had achieved not only personal liberation but had also paved the way for deep familial healing. The legacy of fear was finally yielding to one of understanding and connection. With a renewed sense of purpose, Tom returned home, eager to embrace the lessons learned. He was a man transformed, not only recognized as a medical technician with ambitions but as a father ready to cascade a legacy of hope and reconciliation onto the next generation. Standing before Sarah, he felt an authentic pride stole through. "I did it," he said simply, the clarity in his voice palpable. "We talked, and it was liberating." "You inspired me, Dad," she replied, her smile unfurling in warmth. The narrative had changed. They would navigate this journey together, undeterred by the past. Their family's story would not merely linger in the shadows but would emerge vibrantly, a testimony to strength, resilience, and profound connection. As Tom stood next to his daughter, he marveled at how they could reshape these legacies, knowing that true growth lay in the embrace of vulnerability and the courage to forge ahead boldly. Now was the time to share their experience with others, to inspire a new generation to confront their stories with the same spirit. In that synergy of accomplishment, Tom recognized that his journey had only just begun, a path paved in clarity, connection, and freedom filled with possibilities. Before the night was over, he felt an urgent call, the need to share their story and create a community bound by honesty and authenticity. Tom realized that true success was not merely about personal triumph but about sending ripples of change through generations to come. It was clear, there was more work to be done, and he was ready to embrace every moment. Join him on this journey of transformation by subscribing immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering tale of overcoming. Your support is vital, and only true fans of personal growth understand the importance of these actions.